World War Z looked like the kind of jackpot every Hollywood executive dreams about. Zombies were everywhere, Brad Pitt had locked in as the star, the source novel was already a bestseller, and the studio was willing to pour in whatever it took to make it the blockbuster of the year. But in Hollywood, nothing ever comes that easy. No one thought this movie would start shooting without a script, or that one extra could ruin a scene worth over $1 million. And that was only the start of a production that ended up swallowing everyone who got caught in it. The story of World War Z kicked off long before a single shot was filmed. When Max Brooks, son of comedy legend Mel Brooks, published the novel in 2006, the apocalypse had already begun. And it wasn't zombies leading the charge, but an all-out showdown between two Hollywood heavyweights, Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio. Told like a war correspondent's report on humanity's fight against the undead, the book was an instant hit. Its style, tone, and originality turned it into one of the hottest properties of the decade. And that's when the real battle broke out. Pitt's company, Plan B, and DiCaprio's Appian Way went head-to-head for the film rights. Secret meetings, million-dollar offers, and last-minute calls with lawyers scrambling on the other end. Every studio played it like it was the final hand of the game. Because in Hollywood, landing a bestseller like this isn't just buying a book, it's locking down a franchise. And in that kind of power play, there could only be one winner. In the end, Brad Pitt took the prize, Plan B closed the deal, and World War Z became his crown jewel. Paramount jumped in as distributor, and almost immediately the first meetings kicked off to figure out how to turn a book with no clear storyline and no obvious main character into a movie. And the first obstacle was massive. World War Z was anything but a straightforward story. The novel was a patchwork of interviews and testimonies about the zombie war, told from different countries and perspectives. In Hollywood, that's like trying to make a movie out of 10 different puzzles dumped on the same table. The solution was to invent a hero who could carry the whole story, a UN investigator, played by Brad Pitt, racing against the clock to stop the pandemic. It was a drastic shift that didn't just rewrite the book's essence, it forced a bigger question. How much of the original spirit would survive, and how much had to be sacrificed to sell tickets? The first writer brought in was J. Michael Straczynski, the mind behind Babylon 5 and a veteran on comics like Thor, Doctor Strange, and Fantastic Four. With Pitt's character leading the way, his draft aimed high, a serious, political, thought-driven thriller. It read more like an art house film than a summer blockbuster, but the studio wanted none of it. Paramount wasn't chasing the perfect adaptation, it was chasing a guaranteed hit. Straczynski was crushed, and readers would soon prove him right. Out of nowhere, Straczynski's script leaked, and it sent shockwaves through the production. Fans of the book who got their hands on it were stunned. They said it captured the spirit of the novel, leaned into a more adult tone, and delivered a vision of the zombie apocalypse Hollywood had never dared to put on screen. Some even compared it to Alfonso Cuarón's Children of Men. But inside the studio, the reaction was the opposite. Executives brushed off the fans. To them, that heavy political story was impossible to market as a summer spectacle. Once again, they tossed it aside, making it clear the version readers loved was never the movie Paramount planned to make. To get the project moving, Pitt brought in Marc Forster to take over. Fresh off Quantum of Solace, Forster knew exactly what the studio wanted. Less talk, more firepower. Less geopolitics. More zombies ripping people apart front and center. What Straczynski saw as tension and atmosphere, Forster dismissed as dead weight. What they needed now was a script big enough to carry the massive blockbuster blueprint the studio had in mind. And on paper, that blueprint was insanely ambitious. A full trilogy that would span different parts of the world and show the zombie apocalypse on a global scale. Action, drama, and horror dialed up to epic levels, with Brad Pitt sprinting across the planet as endless swarms closed in on him. But before those hordes ever made it to the screen, the real apocalypse was already brewing behind the camera. And in that chaos, nothing about the ending was guaranteed. For over 2 years, writers came and went through Paramount's offices, each one trying to shape Pitt and Forster's vision and turn the novel into a Hollywood blockbuster. Once Straczynski was out, some heavy hitters stepped in. Matthew Michael Carnahan and Goddard, both pros at weaving complex plots and handling high-stakes material. But even they couldn't land the right balance between staying true to the book and hitting the formula the studio wanted. Time was running out, pressure kept building, and in a move that would come back to bite them, the studio kicked off production, with the script still up in the air. The call shocked everyone, but no one more than Forster. He already had a sinking feeling about what was coming. He was about to walk straight into the hardest shoot of his career. And he wasn't wrong. Few shoots have ever gone off the rails like this one. Production kicked off in 2011 with a budget of $125 million, a huge number but still wasn't enough. From day one, the set felt like hostile ground. The tone shifted overnight, supporting characters popped in and out like background extras, and whole scenes were added or scrapped minutes before shooting. Creative calls were made on the fly. Less about telling a story, more about putting out fires. And in Hollywood, when you start rolling without a plan, there's only one guarantee. Sooner or later, it's all gonna blow up. But let's take it step by step. The first big set piece was filmed in Malta, though the script said Jerusalem. At first, everything looked under control. Well, almost. Hundreds of extras were flown in, along with mountains of costumes, sets, and gear. But someone forgot to file a stack of purchase orders. The result? Millions in unplanned costs, and the budget was already ballooning. And this was just the opening days. Then came Budapest, where the chaos really exploded. Authorities halted production after finding 85 prop weapons without the right paperwork. Sure, they were fake, but the sheer number and the context triggered every alarm. The crew was grounded for days, while the local press had a field day. Brad Pitt and his zombie army under arrest. The headline went global, piling even more pressure onto a shoot already teetering on the edge. And the craziest part? All that gear, which cost millions and nearly dragged Pitt into court, never made it to the screen. Not a frame, just dumped. Gone. Meanwhile, the set was a mess. John Nelson, the Oscar-winning VFX supervisor from Gladiator, walked away after clashing with Marc Forster. The director claimed he had a different vision, but nobody knew what that vision actually was. 3 weeks before cameras rolled, they still hadn't decided how the zombies would move. Let me say that again. The zombies, the core of the entire story. Extras spent hours in makeup without knowing where to stand or what to do, while the crew scrambled just to keep a production that looked ready to collapse at any second. And that chaos with the extras, it would soon trigger an accident that cost millions. But we'll get to that. Forster, a director more at home with small intimate films, was drowning in the scale and the pressure. At first, he was eager to back Paramount's plan and turn the story into a big action movie. But after endless rewrites and constant clashes with writers, extras, and suppliers, he had no idea what he was even doing there anymore. Little by little, Forster lost interest and was reduced to just following orders. His relationship with Brad Pitt got so bad that, according to reports, they stopped talking face-to-face and only dealt with each other through intermediaries. And all this was happening while the script kept changing by the day. Scenes written in the morning were tossed out before nightfall. Everything kept going from bad to worse, and by then Paramount was already asking what else could possibly go wrong. But that's the one question you never want to throw out into the universe, because the universe always answers. And this time the answer was about to prove that yes, things could get a whole lot worse. By this point, Marc Forster was hanging by a thread. The scale of the project had crushed him. His relationship with Brad Pitt was shot, and every day on set felt like a test of survival. With no locked script and zombies that still didn't have a clear look or even basic rules, staging massive crowd scenes was like trying to direct a hurricane. And right in the middle of that storm came one of the wildest stories from the shoot. A story that never made it into any official report. According to word that spread from the set and quickly made its way through Hollywood, during a massive take, one extra in zombie makeup broke choreography and bolted out of place, crashing into part of the set. The impact brought down an entire panel, trashed part of the scenery, and wrecked the costumes of several extras. The shot was ruined, and the production had no choice but to shut everything down. And on a shoot this big, shutting everything down comes with a price. Resetting the set, rebuilding what was broken, redoing makeup for hundreds of extras, and getting the crew back in sync took hours. And in filmmaking, hours mean money. There were never official numbers. But inside the industry, the rumor was the damage was so expensive, it forced cuts elsewhere. We're talking millions, all thanks to a single extra. By this point, Paramount had probably considered firing Forster, but the one who paid the price was the poor extra. The accident was so costly there was no room for second chances. He was immediately removed from the production. No one ever saw him on set again. And his name lingered as a reminder of just how fragile it was to manage extras in Hollywood. For some, he was just an unlucky guy who slipped up at the worst possible moment. For others, he was simply the byproduct of the chaos ruling behind the camera. What no one realized then was that this disaster would become a final warning, a signal that things couldn't keep going like this. And that, in the middle of the storm, someone was about to step in, a figure some would call a savior, and others, a villain. Remember that third act they shot in Budapest? It never saw the light of day. After endless rewrites and writers dropping out mid-shoot, the whole sequence was unsalvageable. The tone didn't match the rest of the movie at all. Too warlike, too disconnected, like the climax of a completely different story. In a move that was equal parts desperate and logical, Paramount went into full panic mode. That's when Pitt suggested Damon Lindelof, the writer of Lost and Star Trek. Lindelof read everything and didn't hold back. The ending has to be redone. All of it, from scratch. The studio swallowed hard and agreed. Soon after, Goddard came in to help finish the rewrite. What they delivered was a total pivot. The big explosive climax was gone, replaced with something smaller, tighter, and built entirely on suspense. Brad Pitt trapped in a lab, hunted by zombies, in a near-silent sequence held together by pure tension. Different, yes, but finally consistent with the rest of the film. But that consistency came with a price. The new ending added another $20 million. What started as a $125 million project had now ballooned to $200 million, without even counting the $160 million for marketing. By the time Paramount realized that dragging things out was only bleeding more money, it was too late. Numbers like that meant one thing. World War Z had to make over $400 million at the box office just to break even, and nobody knew if it could pull it off. Nobody. Except one person, the only one who never wavered through the entire ordeal. While Paramount was drowning in debt and Marc Forster was starting to wonder if he'd picked the wrong career, someone else was pulling the strings from the shadows. A name we've barely mentioned until now, but the real puppet master of this story. And if you've made it this far, you're probably asking yourself, with the chaos behind the camera outshining the apocalypse on screen, what the hell was Brad Pitt doing? For Pitt, World War Z stopped being just a movie and turned into a fight for survival. From the very first day, he knew something was off. He couldn't even look Marc Forster in the eye, and every meeting with Paramount turned into a battle over money. So many writers had come and gone that he'd lost track of their names. His director looked more and more lost in a project that was clearly too big for him, and the script was changing so fast the printed pages were outdated before Pitt could even finish his morning coffee. By then, Pitt realized he couldn't just be the lead actor. If the movie was going to survive, he had to roll up his sleeves. He started staying late to tear through script drafts, sitting in on production meetings that normally had nothing to do with him, and pitching fixes where everyone else only saw dead ends. On set, he'd go from filming an action scene to sitting behind a laptop, rewriting dialogue or clashing with the studio over how to keep the story alive. When the infamous third act shot in Budapest was scrapped, it was Pitt who convinced Paramount to find another solution. He personally called Damon Lindelof and talked him into joining the project. He pushed to bring in Goddard and rebuild the ending from the ground up, even if it meant burning millions more and squeezing an already impossible schedule. During the reshoots, Pitt was in the middle of everything, fine-tuning dialogue, adjusting tone, and overseeing the edit to make sure the climax finally had suspense and coherence. Pitt wasn't seeing his family, barely slept, and spent every hour trying to keep as many plates spinning as he could. He didn't care about honoring the book or turning the project into some billion-dollar franchise. For him, the movie had to survive because he'd fought for it, and he wasn't about to let his name be tied to a box office disaster. For some, Pitt was the savior of World War Z. For others, he was a producer who couldn't let go and ended up taking over everything. The truth is, without him, the movie probably wouldn't have even made it to the editing room. And on a set where everyone else looked ready to fall apart, he was the only one still convinced there was something worth saving. After years of chaos, World War Z had a track record that would give any producer nightmares. An early script that leaked, won over fans, and then got tossed. Accidents on set that burned through millions. And a non-stop carousel of writers coming and going. So many it sometimes felt like there were more of them than extras. Rumors of cancellation had popped up so often that, for many, the movie was already buried before it ever opened. And still, Paramount kept pouring in millions, hoping this monster could somehow rise from the dead in the final stretch. Things were so shaky that even inside the industry, people were already talking about it as a future case study in how not to make a movie. Then, in June 2013, against all odds, the film actually hit theaters. Nobody knew what they were about to see. Would it be a total train wreck or a surprise? Critics, ready to tear it apart, instead found a movie that, while far from flawless, delivered pace, tension, and a global spin on the zombie apocalypse that stood out. Jerusalem, South Korea, Wales, settings that gave it a rare geopolitical scale for the genre. And at the center, Brad Pitt, not the indestructible action hero you'd expect, but a more human, vulnerable lead. At the box office, World War Z turned out to be the final boss, raking in over $540 million worldwide and becoming the biggest zombie movie ever at the time. It crushed Resident Evil, left 28 days later in the dust, and in the process, saved the reputations of everyone involved. Marc Forster smiled for the cameras and dodged the rumors about his clashes with Pitt. But the chaos, the pressure, and the lack of creative control pushed him back towards smaller, more personal films, projects where he could actually hold on to his vision. For Brad Pitt, it was more than just a relief. It was proof that after years of turmoil, and after betting everything on one roll of the dice, he could still come out on top, just not entirely. With over $540 million at the box office and the crown of highest-grossing zombie movie ever, it seemed obvious that World War Z would hit its ultimate goal, becoming a franchise. Paramount was sitting on a goldmine, a global apocalypse to build on, a solid fan base, and Brad Pitt as the face of it all. The options were endless: sequels, spin-offs, series. The original book had enough material to fuel years of stories. For a while, the sequel wasn't just an idea, it was alive and kicking. They even had a director lined up, David Fincher, the mind behind Seven, Fight Club, and Mindhunter. Unlike Forster, his chemistry with Pitt was perfect. A zombie movie with those two sounded like a dream for film fans, almost impossible to mess up. But Hollywood doesn't run on dreams. The studio wouldn't sign off on a budget that once again hovered around $200 million. Then came scheduling problems. Pitt was locked into Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Ad Astra, while Fincher was busy with Netflix. And hanging over it all was China. Over there, movies with zombies or ghosts are heavily restricted, with authorities saying they promote superstition and distort reality, which meant World War Z could never have the reach it needed in that market. And losing China is like throwing tens of millions straight in the trash. No budget, no dates, and a key market off the table. Slowly, Paramount let the project die. They focused on other properties, ones that would make money without the headaches of another nightmare shoot. No scandal, no big announcement, just silence. And that's how World War Z 2 slipped onto the long list of sequels that were promised but never made. A franchise that had survived leaked scripts, on-set accidents, endless rewrites, and a last-minute ending was buried without even a second chance. World War Z wasn't just a zombie movie, it was a zombie. A project that looked dead over and over, but somehow kept dragging itself back up, stumbling all the way to the finish line. It was supposed to be the ultimate blockbuster, and instead became one of the messiest shoots in recent Hollywood history. So the next time you watch it, remember the chaos, the confiscated weapons, the daily script rewrites, and Brad Pitt working overtime just to keep it alive. Now, the question's for you. Would you have wanted to see World War Z 2 with Pitt and David Fincher leading the charge, or is it better to just let this zombie rest? Tell me in the comments.